I'm Matt.
Hey, I'm Steve.
Hey, I'm John.
This is the Sober Friends Podcast. We're here for the sober curious, the new guy, and the old timer. We're here to talk about the stuff anyone looking to live alcohol-free has to face day to day, and how we overcame those struggles. We speak for no 12-step group, but we do try to remain anonymous. You're not alone. This is the Sober Friends Podcast. I'm currently working in therapy on forgiving myself. And when I say forgiving myself, I'm talking about the, what's the term for it? Not necessarily self-acceptance, self-worth. And I think that comes into the idea of why I drink, or why I drank, I should say, of how do you forgive yourself? How do you find your self-worth? And I think this is one of these things that causes people to drink or maybe not stop drinking, that they don't have that. And what do you learn and how to do that? I'm 10 years in and I still feel like I've got a lot of work to do. What's your thoughts on this, Steve? Good morning.
Good morning, Matt. I think one of the things we hear in the rooms a lot is imposter syndrome. I talk about it, right? How we feel less than, right? Those type of feelings growing up like that. A lot of people talk about that in the rooms. And I think that's what we're talking about, right? That feeling that somehow we don't measure up to whether it's other people around us or our own ideal of what we want to be. You know, whether because of our addiction has brought us down, we haven't reached goal, whatever it might be. I think a lot of us go through that feeling, and that was one of the things we talk about speaker meetings and speaking. Like that's one of the things you find out when you go to those type of meetings, that you start hearing, other people felt that way too, right? I know that growing up, I was, before I came into the rooms, I thought pretty much that I felt alone with that feeling. Put it that way. I felt alone with that feeling. So there's a lot of work to be done by that. It took me a long time. I remember like when that started to change for me, right? Which was when I came back, right? I'm 14 years in now. And I remember when that started to turn for me. And I started thinking, maybe I deserve this, and then the forgiveness part, for me, one of the things that happened to me when I came into the rooms and I did my work is I looked back on my behavior, which was not really good behavior, right? And by that I mean in relationships and stuff like that. It wasn't really good behavior, and even in sobriety, I denied that for a long time, right? Because it was really hard to look at and stuff like that. So when I realized that I couldn't walk around with that was something that was hurting me, right, emotionally. So I had to do something about it. So that's where I had to come in and start doing some work on forgiving myself and trying to understand it. Like we talk about, we're not going to regret the past, and we're not going to shut the door on it. We talk about that statement, right? And that's what that means. Like, yeah, there was some shitty stuff I did back there. I'm not going to shut the door on it because I need to remember that's how I behaved, right? And that's where I don't want to go anymore.
I'm dealing with quite a bit of this right now in my job. And to her credit, my boss is really pushing back on me on some of this mindset of either being negative or negative about myself.
Right.
A lot of what I'm doing at work now is creating corporate videos for training.
Okay.
And she's trying to pump me up of what I do is pretty impressive, which I do know at some level, but I also feel like it's not perfect, so therefore it sucks. And I always feel like there's so much I need to learn, and I should have learned it by now. And that's the case with everything. And I also have to understand that what I'm doing at work right now is special because nobody thought of doing it. Nobody was doing anything like this, and it is incredibly creative. And you give it to somebody else, they're not going to do what I'm doing. But man, sometimes it's so hard to believe it.
It is. It's really hard to believe it. It's interesting you say that. As I talk about a lot, I grew up. I worked for 30 years basically in a sales position. And there was a lot of things. I mean, there were some times within that position where my boss, I had several bosses, and that position of sales manager was constantly changing, right? I mean, I probably had, I don't know, I had lots of them, but over the last, say, 10 years, I probably had 3 or 4 of them. And there were times that position was open, and I was always the oldest guy on my team. And guys would say to me, my team members, who we had a really good relationship, hey, you should go for that job. Like, you should apply for that job. And I was like, no, I'm not capable of doing that job. Like, I would know what my bosses did. And part of that is that I never wanted to do the work to do some of the work. I loved selling, right? I loved doing the deals. I love working with my clients, but there was a whole bunch of things like I still today, right? Like I couldn't put a PowerPoint presentation together. I just never had the interest in doing a PowerPoint presentation, right? I never had to. I was never tasked with it. That was always like the sales manager's job. And I used to say this, and I've said it before, I probably said it on this podcast, is that I was a pretty effective salesperson. I had really good relationships, and all of my bosses would come if they had to review me when I got to the point we were in a big company and I would need an annual review. And they would always pick on hey, you don't do this well with this program. This program you're not doing, and this you're not doing. And I would always say to them, how do my numbers look? Oh, your numbers are fine. Your numbers are fine. Well, that's what you pay me for. And I used to say that to my boss. You pay me for my numbers, right? You don't pay me to do this other stuff. Because if I don't make my numbers, you're going to fire me. So, and I realized, like, as long as I make my numbers, all that other stuff can go away. So and this is my point, I think, is I worked against me, right? So it didn't help my self-confidence, right? And if I had taken some of that initiative to do some of that work, I think I would have felt better about myself. Because today I do look at some of those skills and I think, oh, I wish I knew, and I can teach myself how to do a PowerPoint. Like I can, if I had a use for it, then I could teach myself how to do it. I could do all that kind of stuff, but I don't have a use for it. I really don't right now. So part of that is, why do it? So it's a struggle. It's a struggle to have that self-confidence, and that self-forgiveness is a big one. It really is. It's a big one. I think you need to have that self-forgiveness before you can really make any progress with some of that other stuff,
What do you think self-forgiveness looks like?
For me, it looked like, man, for me, it was emotion. It was taking an emotional 50-pound weight off of my shoulders. That's what it was, right? Because what would happen is, like, for me, again, is like I would walk around and that self-resentment, if you will, right? We talk about resentments, and people somehow, they talk about putting a resentment on a loop. You keep playing it over and over and over again. Well, that's what would happen when I would have that guilt feeling, when I was feeling bad about past behaviors. A big part of it was, and I would have that on a loop. And so when I was working on self-forgiveness, I was able to turn that loop off, right? Doesn't mean it's not there. Like, and the perfect example of this is I've talked about it before, was in my first marriage, right? And I divorced my first wife, and I was about 6 years sober, or I was about 6 years not drinking. And I always would say, oh, it wasn't working. I would make up this, oh, it wasn't working, this and that. Like, I had this big thing that I played in my own head because I couldn't accept the fact that I was such a shitty person, right? That I actually did that to this woman, not only to this woman, but to my kids. And so I had to deny it. I had to make up a story that made me able to live with that. And I did that for years. Like, I did that for a long time, for probably close to 20 years. And when I came back after my relapse and I really did this program, I started doing work and I started doing a 4-step, and I started actually talking about it, I realized, oh no, that's not going to work anymore, right? That's not going to work. Like, I have to own up to it. And part of that was I did an amends. I never did amends with my first wife. Part of that was for me to do my amends with her, and own up for how shitty I was. And it was painful and hard, but there is a freedom that comes with it. And now, like I said, I don't have to shut the door on it. I need to remember that because I did it at a period where I wasn't drinking. I wasn't actively an alcoholic, but I was an alcoholic without a program at that point. And I don't ever want to go back to that person. I don't want to be that. So that forgiveness to me was this relief of not carrying around that, not only the guilt, but the lie, right? For me. And as soon as and it doesn't, it's not an instantaneous relief. It's a relief that you get by working on it and getting some help. So that could be through a lot of ways for different people, through prayer, through meditation, through talking with other alcoholics, through therapy, right? You talk about therapy all the time. So there's lots of ways to get some help with that. For me, it was the program of AA and some prayer, but mostly just talking and sharing about it in my meetings and with my people.
One thing that stood out that you just said was being patient. You didn't use those words, but being patient. That it takes time for these things to happen, and we're not very good at being patient. Smartphone culture, you want something to happen now. I can put something into Chat GPT, and instead of even sifting through Google,
right? Yeah,
I can get it now.
Yeah,
that's not how recovery from alcoholism works.
No, not for most of us.
And also the amends process. The amends process can be very wide, and that can, when you do, I forgot what the phrase, but I've heard it in a lot of 12-step meetings. Like when you do estimable things, you get self-esteem.
Right.
And part of doing the amends process is rebuilding those relationships, making yourself feel better because you're owning up for something and making it right. Those are things that help.
Yeah, one of my favorite sayings in AA, and this is something that I hear it a lot at my Friday night meeting. There's one guy in particular, Big Ryan, who says it, who repeats it. He heard it from another guy, and he always says, if I want self-esteem, I need to do estimable acts, right?
Yep.
And I really think about that today, and I try to do simple things, and I'm not talking about big things. And I'll give you an example of that I've talked about a little bit, but I was coming home the other day, and there was a guy walking his dog, and there was another dog running loose around, and I could see it wasn't right. At first, I thought he had two dogs, so I pulled over, put my window down, and he's like, I was walking my dog. This dog came out of nowhere, and this dog was just like loose in the street. And I'm a big dog person, and I keep a leash on the back floor of my car, a cheap leash. I bought like 6 of them on Amazon for this exact reason. Mm-hmm. In case there's a loose dog running around, I have something that I could help corral that dog with. I've actually handed some out the window before to people, like, hey, here's a leash if you can get that dog. So I did, and I stopped. And long story short, I was able to get this dog, which was a young dog, really well, friendly enough, and find out where he lived. And he lived on my street, and I didn't know that. Mm-hmm. But I brought him home. And there was a couple of people in there like, oh, like, you going to take care of that dog? And I'm like, yeah. I literally parked my car, and I walked the dog back home, and then went back and got my car. It's those little type of things, right? And I walked it, and here's the thing. I ring the doorbell. The guy's got a Ring camera on there, so I'm standing there waiting for somebody. I didn't know who it was. And he comes and he opens up the door, and there's a screaming baby in the background, right? And I'm like, man, this guy's got his hand full, right?
Yeah.
He's got this screaming baby, probably let the dog out. He's got like a 4-foot fence around his yard. This dog could easily jump that fence. There's no question. I saw this dog jumping around, and like, oh, this dog could go right over that fence. And he was grateful. He's like, oh, I'm sorry. And then I saw him a couple of days later, and I actually talked to him. And he's a fairly new neighbor. I don't know him, younger guy. But my point is, like, it's that. Now, I could have driven by that situation. This is my point. I could have driven by that situation and gone home. And I would have wondered, what happened with that dog? right? Wonder if that dog made it back. Wonder where that dog was from. I didn't know where it was.
Right.
So that little act right there of me being able to take care of that, bring this dog home, give this guy some relief, that's an estimable act that I'm willing to do today. Because in the past, I would be too busy. I wouldn't want it. Oh, I got to park my car. I got to walk. I got to come back and get my car. Like, I would have found all these reasons not to do it. But today, if I want to change how I feel inside, I need to do some different things. And that's a simple example of what I try to do today.
I think we have to do a little bit more than normal people. That's my mindset. I have to work on being nicer to other people than they need to be to me. I would like to give more than I'm receiving. Part of that is my recovery. And I always feel better when I do that. Yeah. I feel like I've done something really good. I want to go back a step because you mentioned being not so good at PowerPoint. I also don't feel like I'm very good at making presentations. And it's easy for me to forget this with anything. The best way to get better at presentations is to do more of them. Yeah. Like I took on some volunteer projects, which I thought were going to absolutely kill me, but I got them done. These volunteer projects of making videos. And the reason I did that is it always looks good at work when you're logging in volunteer work. When they go around and they're looking to lay people off, it is one of the things they look at. Are you involved with ERGs? Do you do volunteer work? Are you doing more than just your job? So that's on my mind. But if I do these volunteer projects video-wise, I'm going to get better at making videos. I'm going to have the opportunity to have to stretch myself a little bit, which will come along to the job. I recently talked the company into buying this effects package where there are these things. We bought this through Envato, where they have stock music, stock transitions, filters, all of that stuff, because Premiere Pro doesn't have everything at once. And this is where she yelled at me because I'm like, I'm having a hard time figuring this out because I want to have this figured out today and not giving myself the patience to say, I've got all of these tools. It's going to take me a long time to figure this out because there's so much there and that I don't have to have this figured out today. There's that pressure I put on myself, which causes me not to forgive myself.
Yeah, like you said, and patience is a big part of that, right? Is giving ourselves an opportunity to change, right? You said it. You talked about the ChatGPT, right? Is that we want instantaneous results. We want instantaneous answers. And part of that is we just live in that society, and you're a little bit younger than me. Like you grew up with having that. We always have that. I say it to my wife. My wife will ask me a question. I'm like, honey, you got the world at your right, and like she'll be holding her phone, like you got the world at your fingertips right there, right? Like all of the answers that you're asking, all the questions, like those answers are right there for you. And that's it, right? Listen, I do a little volunteer work, and there's lots of times I use an iPhone, so I don't know Android phones that well, and there are other volunteers there who will be there, and they use Android phones. So if somebody comes in with an Android, I will say, "Hey, go talk to Megan. She knows that phone better than me." But sometimes I'm the only person there, and they'll come in like, "Hey, how do you do this?" And I'm like, "I don't know. Let's look it up."
Yep.
Right? Let's Google it. Oh, there's a YouTube video. Let's watch it together. So that's what I do, right? And so I need to do that. And that's the whole point, right? Is like I'm able to do that. So I could look something up. If I have a question of how to do a physical type of thing, I can probably find a YouTube video within probably a minute. Right? Probably 90 seconds at the most if I have to sort through a couple of them. And that's just, that makes us think that, the life should be this way. We should have answers. And then there is that guilt feeling like, especially if it's something I think I should know, right? That's the big thing. Mm-hmm. Oh, I should know this. Like I just talked about, I had an opportunity to do this back in my career and chose not to. And then I have this guilt feeling. I feel less than, and, so it's all that. So this whole act of forgiving ourselves it is a life for some of us, right? For me, I think for you also, it's a lifetime of work.
Yes.
Because so you have to learn that, like, how do I do that? You know, it's not like, oh, I forgive myself, so I'm done with that, because those things will not constantly, those things will occasionally come back up. So you have to have a process of how you do it. And again, for me, for us, if I'm feeling shitty about something like that, it may be just picking up the phone and calling somebody. Really.
Yep.
Yeah, it might be, or going to a meeting, right? Like that's what I mean. Like if I'm having those feelings, there's a reason. So for me, it might be just like I said, talking to another alcoholic or going to a meeting and sharing about it, getting some feedback. There's lots of ways to deal with that, and they don't have to be all recovery. They can be therapy. They can be talking to a partner, a spouse. Lots of ways to deal with that. But for alcoholics, the problem, or for addicts and alcoholics, the problem is that we didn't like those feelings. So we drank to cover up those feelings, right? So that's the danger for me, is that I can't let myself wallow in that feeling too long, because if I do, eventually, it won't happen right away. Eventually, I know I'm going to start thinking, man, I don't like this feeling. Mm-hmm. And what's the easy solution? The easy solution is I could walk to a package store if I wanted to, right? That's the easy solution.
Yep.
And just pick up a bottle and start like making those feelings disappear.
That's the pressure valve on the pressure cooker, is going to get booze.
Yeah.
This is what becomes very hard about sobriety, is all of these things that we're talking about are all about maintaining sobriety. It may not sound like it, of my self-esteem or not feeling my worth or not feeling my weight is not something like that, but it is, because you have to manage. It's whack-a-mole sometimes that all these things pop up and you have to deal with all of them. Mm. And there's a lot of them. And if any one of them get out of control, then the steam valve is going to pop and you're going to drink. So you kind of have to have a standard set of tools that when any one of them pop up, there's something you can do. And it's okay for that to be uncomfortable. There's something you said there that I identify with, which is, in my own words, I'm saying this: I should have figured this out before. Why haven't I figured this out? Why haven't I accomplished this? What's wrong with me? Which sometimes things happen in their own course. And when I'm looking career-wise, well, why didn't I accomplish this, and this? Well, maybe I was on the wrong path. Yes, I haven't accomplished those things, but I've accomplished a lot over here,
right,
that other people don't know how to do. So if I got myself into the next level of management, I wouldn't be making videos and doing creative stuff,
right,
which I feel much more. So I think about, gosh, it's going to be a hard interviewing for that next level up of leader of leaders. If I interview next for, we want you to make more complex videos all the time, that's an interview I could do.
Right. Even
though my skills might not be there, that's an interview I could do, and I would do it. I would apply for that easily.
You know, we all, again, I don't want to say that. I, for sure, and a lot of other people, we always sort of do things we like to do.
Yep.
Like you said. So, right, you like doing videos. You like that's one of your core things. Like, you like doing that. And I'm sure when you do it and you get a nice video and it comes out great, you feel really, really good about it.
Absolutely.
So you want to do it more. This is the whole point.
Mm-hmm.
Now you change that, and there's something really hard to do that you're not really good at, right? That discipline that you need to do that. And it brings me back to when my kids were in even high school, but college too, early on college. Is, my daughter would come in, or my son, but I think my daughter more, I remember it, is that she'd come in and she would talk about, she was never a big math person, and this is really hard in this math subject. I'm struggling with it. And I used to say to her, well, I would look at her grades or whatever, and we talk about it, and she'd be like blowing it out of the water with English, right? Like English would be 100, she'd be like 4.2. And I'm like, you know what you need to do, honey? You need to back off on the English. You got that. right? You got that. You need to back off on that. I know you like it. I know you like to write that stuff, but and put some more time into that harder subject. And that's hard for a lot of us to do, right? It's hard for us to move away from that stuff. So, yeah, I mean, we that's me too. That's me too. It's like I like doing stuff. As I've gotten older, I've come to realize that I'm much more willing to ask for help today than I used to. I got some projects going on. I've had a very busy summer. I've done very little hiking with the guys this year, and a lot of that for lots of reasons. I just never got in shape to do it, and I got myself busy, and I got doing some projects which were good. But today I'm willing to ask for some help. So I've had, even now I got a couple things that I want done. My neighbor right next door is a contractor, carpenter. And I said, "Hey, Mike, can you come over and just do these things for me? Like put a small window in, do this, that, do that." And now it's like they were on my to-do list. Like I had this big to-do list, like install this exhaust fan, get the window, do this. It's like, okay, those are all done. They're not done yet, but I've given them to him. So I'm able to concentrate on some other stuff. Before I felt like I had to do everything and it was all about me. So lots of changes had to be made for me so that I could start having a bandwidth that allowed me to do some other work, like forgive myself, like estimable acts, like, doing some things that make me feel good about myself.
You're speaking to me there too, because I've got a lot of things on my to-do list. And it's a reminder, sometimes the list is too long. It's not reasonable. So you have to make an other list of to-do things that are going to happen later. You prioritize them down. That, yes, I'd love to get all this stuff done, but I'm only going to set myself up for failure and set myself up for feeling terrible about myself of, well, why can't I get this stuff done? I can't get it done because I can't do it all by myself.
Right.
So I'm going to take a chunk of that. I'm going to put the to-do later list, and I'm going to cross off the things that I have to do now. I was behind on one of these volunteer projects, and I was procrastinating, and I just couldn't get unstuck. So I took last Saturday and I just banged it out.
Right.
And sometimes I need a few hours just to do this uninterrupted where it can get done and I will feel better. And once I get moving and progress, then I feel better.
Yeah, I can get stuck in that stuff too. And this year especially, it's interesting because the last couple summers, spring, summer, early falls, I've done a lot of hiking. And in order for me to do a lot of hiking, and when I talk hiking for me living in Connecticut, that means me going up to New Hampshire, doing some of the bigger mountains up there. That requires a lot of time for me. It requires a lot of time for me to physically do hiking, even if I'm not hiking up in those mountains, to continue to hike harder and harder hikes so I can stay in shape, go to the gym, work out. So my time to do other stuff is limited because I do have to devote a lot of time to that. I'm not a young guy anymore. And so this year, I was able to look at some of the projects and do some of those. And I actually had, for anybody who struggles with that, I actually started multiple lists. And one was, I literally called it my big to-do list, right? And these were big projects that would take me multiple days over time. And I have one of them going on now. I started working on it. I got a pool house next to my pool, and it's on a slab, and I could see some of the shingles that are too close to the ground are rotten, and I have to take those off, and I got to look, and I opened up a corner of that, and it's like, it's all rotten underneath, and it's a job. Like I can do that job, but it's like hours of time of cutting out rotten boards and doing all that. And I don't work at it. Like there was a day where I could go out there and work for 10 hours. I don't do that anymore, right? The other thing I've done is like I'll go out and put like 3 hours or 4 hours into a job like that. And yesterday it was about 1:30 in the afternoon. And I'm like, I'm done. Like I don't want to start the next part of this project. So I'll go out there today and I'll take another shot. And it's hard. It's not physically hard, although it's down low, but it just takes a long time. And plus I don't do that stuff, right? Again, I'm not there's guys out there who probably, oh, yeah, I know exactly what to do. Bring in they have all the tools, blah, 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 right? And for them, they would have done what I did, what I need done. They probably would have done it in a day, right? It's going to take me 3, 4, 5 days to do it, depending on how long I work. But my point is, like, I can do that today, right? I can take that list. I feel good. I feel good enough about myself. Like, I can just take my time doing it. And a lot of that is because I asked for help. And, and the reason why I say that is that by not overburdening myself with to-do lists, right, which I'm able to have some time to work on myself and to do estimable things, right?
Yep.
Like we're doing a retreat. And matter of fact, on the screen, I sat down here because I'm the treasurer, whatever you might want to call it. And I got a pile of money that people have given me, so I need to organize that, right? And I feel good about that. This is a good retreat. Going to have about 36, 37 guys. And I feel good that I'm able to do that, right? To help organize this thing. So it's nice that I'm able to sit down today. And here's my point too, is that, like, so I have to do that today, and I got some other things going on. If I don't get out to work on my pool house project today, I'm okay with that. Like, it's not going to drive me nuts. Like, oh, I should have done that. Should have done that. Should have done it. I have some. I give myself some flexibility today, where I can make sure I do some self-care. Right? So I have to do some work, spend some time with my wife, walk the dog. Like, after I get done here, I'll do a little work on the retreat, and then I got to walk the dog. I walk the dog every morning for about 45 minutes, right? So time we get done here and I get out there, like, it may be lunchtime before I really get a chance to do any project around the house, So I give myself some leeway to do that. And that's the other part of that forgiveness is, like, I give myself time where I'm not overburdening myself with things to do.
Right. I would love to hear what you have to say about this topic. How do you forgive yourself? How do you feel better about where you are? How do you let some things go so you can move forward? Matt at SoberFriendsPod.com, on Instagram at SoberFriendsPod. I'll let you get out to that shed, that pool house, Steve. Get moving.
All right, Matt.
We'll see everybody next week. Bye, everybody.
Great. See ya.
You made it this far into the podcast. That tells me you're a pretty big fan. If you like what we do and you find value in the podcast, consider a donation at buymeacoffee.com/SoberFriendsPod. Your donation keeps us on the air to help out the new guy and helps us defray some of our costs. If you find value in our podcast, please consider a donation at buymeacoffee.com/SoberFriendsPod.